Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and a company update from District Metals. Chatting again with the president and CEO Garrett Ainsworth. Garrett and I are going to be recapping some recent news on new targets being generated by the company on their uranium and energy metal assets in Sweden, assets outside of the Viken property. Also going to touch on some of the questions I've been getting on the recent stock sell-off, stock down almost 50% in just over a month. That is after a pretty strong run throughout really the middle part of this year. Garrett, let's start off with the recent news. A couple news releases from November 18th and December 2nd, highlighting some mobile MT survey results on these Alum Shale properties. As I said, these are not on the Viken project, which is really your flagship, but all the other projects that you have put in the portfolio in Sweden. Really, the consistent thing that I'm seeing here is you are really identifying some high priority, large scale targets. Talk to us about what you're seeing in these mobile MT surveys, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great to be back on with you, Corey. So this mobile MT survey, this airborne survey, we flew with a helicopter over the Viken property originally in the spring of this year. And we specifically focused on the Viken deposit to get the signature of the Viken deposit. And it showed a good conductive response over the Viken deposit. So we've used that signature to identify other areas within the Viken property and also within our Alum Shale properties. And the reason why it works so well, it'll tell us the depth to the Alum Shale that's mineralized and also the thickness, because the Alum Shale, that's this host rock for the Viken deposit and for other, Viken deposits we're trying to discover, it is loaded with graphite. So it is a super conductor. And then all the other geology, all the other rock in the area is not conductive. So this mineralized alum shale, it stands out very, very strongly. And it's actually worked better than I could even imagine in terms of modeling it and getting projected like depth to it and thickness, because that's going to help us to prioritize the drill targets for next year. So we put out three news releases from the alum shale property, broke it out into Osterkallen, Tajo, and Malgomai. And Osterkallen was, a ginormous mobile MT conductive anomaly, never been drilled, up to it was 8 kilometers long by up to 3.5 kilometers wide. It's going to be, something I cannot wait to drill next year. And then Tajo didn't have as big of conductive anomalies, but definitely has quite a few very strong ones that deserve follow-up. And the key thing here is though, like we're not looking for another 4.3 billion ton deposit. So when we get around to doing our preliminary economic assessment within the Viken deposit, we're probably only going to base the mining scenario on 100 million tons. So that's kind of what we'll be looking to drill off, within these mobile MT anomalies are resources that are about 100 million tons, because hopefully this time next year, we'll have completed the Viken PEA that should show hopefully some very strong financial metrics. And then it'll be based on 100 million tons over like 10 to 12 years. And then we'll be able to have all these other resources of 100 million tons. So it makes it really easy for people to go, okay, so they could potentially do this same mining scenario in all these different locations. And then you do the math and of what the company should be valued. And then Malgomai I was really impressed with the results that came out of Malgomai. So it's quite a ways up north. It's about almost like 200 kilometers northeast from our Viken project. So the way that we staked those mineral licenses, we covered areas from geological mapping that indicated there was a alum shale there. We also used data that was available from the government, geophysical, geochemical. And it looks like our initial staking covered the majority of these anomalies. And then when we flew them, boof, they just lit up like a Christmas tree. And they are huge. Like target areas A and B are, almost, in and around 20 kilometers long by about, 4 to 4.5 kilometers wide. Like these are huge. You could fit multiple, like if this is mineralized alum shale, there is potential to host multiple Viken deposits within target areas A and B just at Malgomai itself. So again, it's all about optionality. So if we can have multiple places to choose from for a mining scenario of alum shale, this is great because that means we can pick and choose which landowners we want to work with on a project going forward.
So, Garrett, with all this target generation, you even had some magnetic survey results from another project. So, all of your project portfolio here, how do you go about prioritizing these? Do you need to do more work on them, or just from these survey results, are you able to put them in a certain pecking order and give us an outline of which ones you're going to be testing in a certain order?
Yeah, so we're still, I mean, although we've got the data interpreted, we're still picking out drill targets and drill target areas. I mean, it's all great to have anomalies, but obviously some of these anomalies are going to be for the mobile MT are going to cover swampy areas. So those areas we will only be able to drill in the winter. And so, yeah, we'll have more information on what target areas we're more likely to target. We'll do that in January because there's still a lot of work to go through and handpick exactly what we're going to drill. But I mean, the focus will be at the Viken property for those alum shale, sort of the mobile MT targets, especially areas A and B, target areas A and B. And then also, I would say Malgomai and Osterkallen as part of the alum shale properties will be priority areas for us to follow up with drilling. And then, yeah, we flew a drone magnetic and radiometric survey in the summer over our three properties that are not alum shale. So that's Ardnasvarre, Sockjarn, and Nine Force. So I don't think we'll be looking to drill those projects next year. We need to, those are like higher grade uranium, but lower tonnage type targets. So they require more refinement on the ground through mapping, prospecting, sampling to really help advance those to drilling. I mean, there are some parts of those projects that we could drill without doing any groundwork, but the concentration that will be focused on are alum shales in Sweden.
So when you do get drilling any of these targets, whether it's at Viken or these other assets, can you explain to us maybe how much drilling it'll take to either confirm and validate that these are targets that they could carry mineralization, or to write them off and say, okay, this one didn't work, it's time to move on?
I love this question. It's really just, one drill hole into a mobile MT conductive anomaly, and we'll know if we're onto something or not. These are going to be vertical holes. They're going to be shallow, like 200 meters, maybe 300. I highly doubt they'll go deeper than 300. I mean, you got to follow the geology when you're drilling, but we're only really looking for alum shale that's shallow and where it's thick. And the continuity of this type of mineralization is it's very good. And then we've got some good control from the mobile MT as well. So the drill spacing to get to an inferred mineral resource estimate is 300-meter spacing. So, and then to get to indicated, it's 100-meter drill spacing. That's huge, especially, from my background working in the Athabasca Basin, where you're talking about 50-meter spacing for inferred and, 15 to 10 meters for indicated and measured. So if we're targeting 100 million tons, of alum shale in Sweden, given that drill spacing for the inferred category, if the alum shale is 100 meters thick, that's only going to be an area of 600 meters by 600 meters, which will only require 9 drill holes. If the alum shale is 50 meters thick, then that's an area of 900 meters by 900 meters, and that will require 16 drill holes. And again, these drill holes are maybe 200, maybe 300 meters deep. They're very shallow. So to drill off 100 million tons, could be less than $1 million. Let's call it $1 million Canadian plus or minus, which is extremely cheap considering that's all the drilling you would need before moving towards a preliminary economic assessment for that area.
So when you do decide what to drill, what do you need to permit? What does that look like now that this uranium moratorium has been lifted?
So we're not going to make any drill permit applications until after January 1st, 2026, because that is when the legislation will change to allow uranium exploration and mining. To do it before that would not be advisable, I have been told. So in the new year, we will submit our drill applications for drilling, Viken targets and also the Alum Shale properties. The timeline, you will basically you create an area where you're going to drill, and you usually constrain it to properties. So, if you don't have to, you try to minimize the amount of properties that your work area is covering, because it means less time will be spent on, consultation with landowners. And then the permitting process can take, anywhere between 6 weeks, or I would say up to 6 months. And that really just depends on how the landowners are. If they're good with it, and just, or they, don't have any responses, then things can be 6 weeks. But if they've got questions and you need to have a lot of back and forth, then things can take 6 months.
Okay. Yeah, I keep forgetting that even though the vote went through, that the moratorium, it takes until the new year for that to actually, for the legislation to go through. So I guess just in summary, before we get into some of the other questions I got, in terms of 2026 work plans, can you give us a big picture outlook of what could be coming next year?
Yeah, definitely. So we don't have board approval on anything I'm about to say, but from a high level, this is what we're thinking. So looking to do a preliminary economic assessment on, it'll probably be within the Viken deposit, and that way it'll make things go as fast as possible. We would not look to include rare earth elements in this preliminary economic assessment, because I need to be able to talk about the financial metrics of our Viken deposit sooner than later, so that we need to get it to an NI 43-101 level, so that it can go in the presentation, it can go on the website, and I can talk openly about NPVs and CapEx and all that good stuff. So that will be a big focus for us next year. And then obviously we'll look to do some drilling on the Viken property on the mobile MT target areas A and B, where we would look to hopefully drill off 100 million tons at each target area. And then we'll look to do some drilling at the Malgomai and also at Osterkallen at those mobile MT anomalies. We've also picked up a bunch more mineral licenses within the Alum Shale property package. So we need to fly those with airborne mobile MT in order to, move forward with drilling, or just drop them if there's no conductive response on them. So that would probably start in June or even July of next year. And then with our non-alum shale properties, Ardnasvarre, Sarkjarn, and Nineforce, we will be doing some ground field work that'll include mapping, prospecting, sampling, helping to refine drill targeting on those projects. So it's going to be a really busy year. I'm really looking forward to it, especially now that the pathway is clear and uranium exploration and mining is allowed as of January 1st, 2026.
All right, Garrett, time to get into some of the questions that I've been receiving, and I'm sure you've been receiving them too. Questions on the share price. No one was complaining when it was ripping higher. In April, the share price was around 30 cents. And in October, I believe it was, the share price was up to right around $1.50. Since that time, though, it has pulled back, currently trading in the mid 80-cent range. So it has pulled back almost 50% in just over a month. There has been some high volume out there. Can you give us some insights? What are you hearing? What's going on with this correction?
Well, first off, it's really frustrating, building shareholder value and then seeing it get decimated like this. And, from a corporate standpoint, we're doing everything we can. And my biggest concern is that, the share price going down like this reflects that we're not doing something correctly. But, we've had lots of internal discussions, and from what I can tell, my picture of the share price performance, especially since the vote happened on November 5th, was that there was a much larger sell on the news event than I think we were expecting. That, combined with overall market for uranium companies has not been very good. We look at many of our peers have come down in share price quite significantly as well. But then also, you look November 14th, the short position on District Metals was increased to 2.2 million shares short. That's a bit suspicious. The volume has been quite high. Anonymous is all over the ticker on the buy and sell. There's some bot trading. There's a lot of bot trading going on with share lots of 100, 500,000. I wouldn't be surprised if I get approached for a financing, but yeah, I'm not happy with how things are trading. I've reached out to the exchanges to ask, is there anything suspicious going on? Replies back are no, everything looks normal. So we just need to keep pushing through, doing what we've been doing, advancing the projects, and this too shall pass. And then hopefully the upward trajectory will resume after we get through this.
So the question being, do you need money? How much cash are you sitting on right now?
That's a good point. So we do not need money. We are not financing in the short term here. I've heard from multiple people saying that they've heard we're doing a financing. This is incorrect information. I don't know. Yeah, there must be a purpose behind it. We have $9 million Canadian in the treasury. We have warrants that are way in the money that would bring in another 2.7 million Canadian dollars. Not really sure what the budget's going to be next year, but let's say it's around 5 million Canadian. We do not need to finance next year, but I'm not saying that we won't finance at some point next year, because if a strategic financing comes along, then it's always a good idea to take it as long as it's with the right people. So, but yeah, right now in terms of short-term financing, there's no financing coming imminently at all, even though I've been hearing that from multiple sources.
Okay, thanks for addressing those, Garrett. Let's wrap it up with a quick comment on valuation now. We've been talking a lot about valuation on this show and a lot about really comparing companies to their peers. Right now, your market cap is a little over $150 million Canadian. Can you walk us through any valuation metrics that you have regarding the resource base that you have? Anything else that we could be looking at to compare you to some of your peers, please?
Yes. So actually, I just gave a presentation at OTC Markets just before we got on. And, we have a slide with a table that talks about with our, developer and explorer peer group. And, District Metals, when you take our enterprise value in US dollars and you divide it by our pounds of uranium in the ground, you come out to 8 cents per pound in the ground. And the average for our peer group is $3.44. So that's a huge discrepancy. I'm not saying that we're going to $3.44, but obviously this indicates that we are way undervalued. And I should mention when we first picked up the mineral licenses for Viken, we were getting valued at about 1 cent per pound in the ground. So we've gone up, 8 times. I mean, we were up 10 times, but we backed off. And so there is a huge discrepancy here. Even with our enterprise value divided by our indicated resources, we're at 73 cents per pound in the ground. And our peer group average is about $4 per pound in the ground. So it's pretty clear that our valuation doesn't make sense. We're way undervalued. And I think a PEA will help to bolster that next year. I'll also mention, low grade uranium deposits were bought out in the last uranium cycle for multi-billion-dollar transactions, which was much higher than anything happened with high grade, especially in the Athabasca Basin. So 2007, Uranium was bought out for 2.5 billion US dollars by Areva, which is now Orano, and that was for quite a low grade deposit called Tracope, that's now owned by Bannerman Energy, who actually their enterprise value divided by inferred resource is about $6.42 per pound in the ground. They're at a feasibility stage, I believe, so they've pushed it along nicely. And then going back to Southern Africa in 2012, Extract Resources was bought out by CGN, a Chinese state-owned nuclear company, for 2.2 billion Australian dollars. And that was for 90% of the Husab uranium deposit, which is currently a mine. Yeah. And then on the comparable side for high grade uranium monetizing events during that same time period, Hathor Exploration was bought out for $650 million by Rio Tinto for the Rough Rider deposit. That was subsequently sold by Rio Tinto, I think a couple years ago, to UEC for 175 million. So they took quite a loss on that one. But it really does show, low grade uranium can be quite valuable in these uranium cycles. And, again, it's very important to remember the Viken deposit is not just uranium. It's also got significant vanadium, potash, molybdenum, nickel, zinc, copper, and potential for rare earth elements as well.
All right, Garrett. Thank you very much for addressing these questions. Everyone, please keep sending me your questions. Happy to get those addressed for you when I chat with Garrett. Garrett, again, thank you for your time, and I'll follow up with you as there is some more news released.
Excellent. Thanks, Corey. Always a pleasure.